we've got a bunch of characteristics, we've got a bunch of traits that we've put together that comprise of what makes high-performing people, high-performing teams through your experience. What have you found when it comes to this first one in commonalities for personal drive and motivation?
It's a really interesting one and a great starting point. So I think everybody needs a reason to be doing what they're doing. We've got this either an aspirational goal that's going to be completely transformational for the individual. Imagine what my life would be like as the Olympic champion or the captain of an international cricket team, something like that. So that's pulling people towards it. And a great example of that would be working with Graham Smith and the South African cricket team some years ago. I know Graham's story was that when he was about 12, he'd just started playing cricket, and he drew a picture at school in class one day, and they said, "Oh, paint a picture of your future self," kind of thing, the teachers. And he drew a picture of himself in South African cricket kit and stuck it on his fridge. And as we all know, that went on to come true. And he became South Africa's most successful cricketing captain. So that's a great example of somebody setting this inspirational image and vision, almost like a mood board, of how you want things to turn out. And I guess he used that to motivate him on a daily basis when he didn't want to go training, or he didn't want to eat the healthy foods, or he didn't want to, wanted to go to the parties but shouldn't. That kept him disciplined. So I think some people are really motivated by achieving something transformational. And we also see some people that are motivated to get away from something, to get away from, a tough environment, or to prove a critic wrong. It's almost like the wolves are chasing some people, and that gives them that energy and that, tenacity and that drive to do the hard things. I can't remember who it was that said it, but there was a great quote that champions set goals that are worth suffering for. And I think, we have that, don't we? That becoming a high performer is so tough, and it's so sustained, and we've got to be so patient, but there's a lot of really difficult choices that come from it. So we need a reason to do it. AP McCoy, said that he was champion jockey for 20 years. And he woke up every morning thinking somebody was going to beat him every day. So he got up and got onto the horses and did the training and all the stuff that goes with it. So you've either got this inspirational and aspirational long-term goal that's worth suffering for, or you're trying to get away from something, or you're trying to, satisfy your own demons, I guess, that you're good enough to perform.
How much of that do you think is actually built upon them becoming a character or a version of themselves that they end up being proud of? Or is it built more towards the accolades, the recognition, the trophies, the teams that I get in, and then that recognition of the person they've become by getting those things ends up being the byproduct at the end of it? Where does the balance lie? Do people look for either or more or one or the other?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think society clearly celebrates outcomes, millionaires, champions, all the trophies and silverware, and the medals. But I think, having interviewed probably about 150 elite performers now in lots of different fields, business, sport, the military, academia, there's a great sense that it's much more about the striving than the arriving, if you like. The overwhelming emotion. Interviewed for my podcast, Johnny Wilkinson, and that moment he speaks about, his favorite moment before the 2003 World Cup was that moment as he saw the referee reaching for his whistle in his pocket. So it wasn't the lap of honor, it wasn't the open top buses, it wasn't the fame and fortune that came after the kick. It was in those untouchable moments where he knew that they were going to achieve it, but they hadn't yet. And that's really interesting to think that somebody's at their happiest before they achieve the actual thing that everybody thinks is going to make you happy. So there's a lot to be said for that. I think, Instagram's great and shows us the wonderful lives that so many people live, but actually the lived experience is much more about, becoming the hero in your own story, overcoming the monsters and, becoming that success and overcoming the obstacles and adversity. And I think that's where, certainly as individuals, we should take more pride by looking back and accepting where we've learnt and grown. But also when we're leading teams, to not just talk about winning and losing, but talk about the striving and the risks people took and the relationships people have built and the reflection people have had, because those are all key stepping stones on that path to mastery, which, as we know, gets steeper as you get higher up.
It's interesting because I've been tussling with this landscape that many people I read about, and I think it's come from a lot of anecdotal experience and qualitative research of athletes that have been at the top of their game and then looking back on the experiences they've had. And I tussle with this, the people that are going into these high performance domains, the people that are really at the top of their game in sport, academia, business, that at the time they're striving for these things, they're not really thinking about their well-being. They are really thinking about this goal, this shiny object. I know people like Kath Bishop will talk about the long win in her book and a lot of what she will write about. But I'm always thinking, if you take away that medal and that trophy and that recognition, most high performers will go, it's not what I'm doing it for. Like I want that thing. But then I love someone like Jemima Montag's view, which is this idea of like wanting it but not needing it. So I want it but don't need it. But then also, is there a difference between those who make it and then those who really make it and exceed and are just at the very top of the game? And those are the people that you've spoken to and have been around the most. And yeah, I don't know where you lie with that in terms of how you balance the whole being driven for this external goal, but not at the detriment of your well-being, or is it just baked in because the only way to get there is through really pushing yourself to places where other people aren't willing to go?
It's an interesting one, and I think it's sort of a philosophical debate at the moment about what is high performance. Is high performance somebody who's, a multimillionaire that's built and sold a business but has no relationships and has suffered their health? Is it, an Olympian that's, not left the gym, but just been there all the time and achieved this goal, but has no other, you know, support networks or whatever in their life? And I think that's a very narrow view of performance. I think certainly we've seen, and I think the pandemic created a bit of a shift with this, that, everybody was in the rat race in business or sort of relentless and focused in the sporting world. But I think just that pause button, the great pause that we had during the pandemic, has given that period of reflection. And we saw so many people become sick and ill and even lose their lives or lose loved ones. And it makes you think, well, what is all this for? If something like that out of our control can take so many people or can impact our lives when we're in the middle of this, marathon sprint of relentless, focus, is that really success? So I think there's a really philosophical debate about it. But no one gets to the top without a huge amount of sacrifice and a huge amount of hard work. And bordering on obsession, I would say. There have to be those periods where people block 90% of other things out and focus on becoming exceptional at what they do. So I do think it's a balance for everybody. And I also think with increased awareness, we need to almost see it in seasons rather than just seeing it as a block of stubbornness for 8 years or 10 years. So it's almost this idea that for the next month, I'm going to lock myself in a room, I'm going to write this chapter of the book, or, I'm going to go and do all these keynote speeches around the world because that's just a really good platform for my next year. But we can't do that all the time. So I think what I'm seeing and what I'm actually trying to do myself, I've built my own business and that's growing and I'm sort of strapped to the machine a little bit. So we've got to be careful what we wish for. But I think it's these periods of reflection and refocusing to say, okay, in this next season of my life, in this next month or 3 months, I'm going to recalibrate my diary to be this balance. I'm going to spend more time with my partner or my kids. And then in that next period, the kids are back in school, the summer holidays are gone, and I'm going to really dive in and focus on work again. So I think the key to it really is to be in control, almost like you're the CEO of your own performance company, and you're not just this stubborn, relentless person, because that's not good. I think there's a big difference between being resilient, which is almost like this. I also almost imagine these huge bamboo trees, they've got deep roots and they sway and flex in the conditions as they change as the wind blows, rather than a concrete block, a sort of a solid block. We're not trying to be so finite in everything we do. We've got to let our energy wax and wane a little bit and have periods of intensity, but also have periods of reflection and recovery. And I think that's what resilience is all about. But that sort of stereotypical view of high performance is relentless, fast lane all the time. And as we know, that comes with its costs. It costs health, it costs relationships, and it costs that diverse perspective that we often need to have a balanced life. If we've got friends outside of our sport, if we've got interests and hobbies outside of our sport, that helps us to stay a little bit more balanced in our identity, rather than just being the cricketer or just being, the salesperson or whatever it might be. So, yeah, really good question.
It's interesting because I then reflect on my own journey getting into professional sport, and I don't know what yours was like before you turned pro, but I I don't I know I was single-minded. I know I can't go I'm not going to that party. I am not doing that because I've got matches, I've got training, I've got whatever is coming up. But then I also think back, and I had other activities going on. I had friendships that I was able to dip in and out of. Now, the cost I've always said that I had was those friendships and relationships are not as deeply rooted as I would love them to be. And I'm now probably paying that cost right now, just with being 35 and them having progressed in their lives to kids, houses, rooting themselves in their areas, and I'm not at that place. And so there was no, for me, thinking about all of that. It was just kind of doing it. Whereas now I see so many young people that are trying to make it into a sport, thinking because of what they see online, because of the information overload that they have, that they obsess so much more that it becomes even more single focused. But then you see no diversity in their experience, and you don't see any sort of like roundness of them as an individual, and it's constricting, and it's just like then it's never ending, and then it's almost you see like a road to burnout a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I played, in the black and white era almost. It's, retired in 2008, and I was a pro for nearly 20 years. So, my parents were quite strict and pushy with me to make sure that I carried on my education. So I was offered a full-time contract at 16, but I didn't take it because I stayed on at school and did my, GCSEs and A levels. And then I went off to Durham University. Amazing experience, and I played instead of a 6-month full-time, a 6-month contract. I had a 3-month contract for 3 years. And then at the end of finishing university, our professional contracts were 6 months. So I'd travel to New Zealand and South Africa, living in Cape Town or Wellington for 6 months. And what an incredible life experience, that era of, well, the club's not going to pay you for 6 months. So you literally have to find a job. And I was, working in a greenhouse or, working in a factory or something in New Zealand for 6 months, or coaching in a school in Cape Town. And those are amazing life experiences. So I wouldn't have changed that I wouldn't have traded 1 or 2, 3 months of that for 3 months in the indoor school bowling at a cone. These are life experiences. And this is where we have to try and view not just there's a lot of specialization that takes place in athletes younger now. You can't play football if you're a cricketer, you can't play rugby. I played lots of sports, and I think that was really good for overall coordination and certainly for things like fielding, where you're probably more of an athlete than a cricketer, that was really good for me. So I think there's two things. There's the athletic sort of dexterity, if you like, and literacy. The broader that can be, the better. But then we've also got our identity and our life experiences. And I would say that there's huge benefit to living abroad, having to, sort out disputes or travel from A to B, or, meet a group of people that you've never met. And those kind of things are really valuable as well. So again, it's how you define success is at the center of this, really.
All right. Number 2, continual growth and learning.
Well, I think, having worked in sports psychology and, been to some of these incredible football academies or, elite sports environments, we've got this feeling that the parents of little Johnny or little Susie sort of think that because they can dribble through a cone or they've dominated their, under 10s network, that they're going to be the next Lionel Messi or, Ben Stokes or whatever. And that that talent, that natural gift that they've got that you see very early on is nothing more than their passport into that environment. So that is not going to tell you anything apart from access into that room. Now, the problem is that little Johnny or Susie is now in a room full of people that are probably better than little Johnny and Susie, and the parents thought little Johnny and Susie were the best in the world, and they might not even be the best in their city. So now they're in a national setup or a, high performance environment where the standard is, higher. So how does this, messiah then rock up, with the ham sandwich and think that they're going to carry on when everyone else is better than them? Do they think that those other people have an unlucky, they've got an unfair advantage because they know the coach or they're from the same school, or, there's all this justification that goes on. They might just be better. So it's at this point that we need people to be, humble and curious and coachable. That is one of the key characteristics of the elite performers. They are voracious. They are always looking to learn, and they don't see their success being limited by just their talent. And they have that tenacity when they do hit a roadblock, they do get injured, they do, there's an issue with the way they're playing. They find a way to be successful. I think that's one of the key elements that I've seen.
What do you think stunts people from not having that perspective?
Well, I think it's that belief that you are gifted, you are talented, and we all know Carol Dweck's great work, but that language around you're clever, you're talented, you're gifted, that's enough. It's not enough. It's half of it at best, really. And then the rest of it is, how do you apply that on a particular day? So again, been really lucky to meet and play against some incredible people in my playing career and interview them afterwards. But we played India once, and I was having a chat with Sachin and trying to pick his brains. And Sachin Tendulkar, this incredible iconic player, one of the best players ever, I said to him, how much of your natural talent do you take to the wicket, and how much of it do you adapt and try and learn on that day? And he said, 40% of me is the way I play, and this is me. And 60% of it is the weather conditions, the ball, the fast bowler, the spinner, the outfield, the wind direction. And this is, fascinating that you've got one of the potentially most dominating players of, world sport, who's saying that he's at the mercy of the context, of the arena, of the opponent. And he's humble enough to say, I'll adapt. So on some days, yes, you can put your foot down and, drive fast, but other days you're going to hit some red lights and you're going to slow down and you've got to wait. And it's that patience and adaptability and tenacity and asking for feedback and deconstructing what other people have done and trying to find a way to simplify that so that you can build it back up into your skill set and find your own way of doing it. That's what's critical. So yeah, there's always lessons, there's always clues that are left behind by these great people. And it's those patterns that when you've got this humility and curiosity, you can pick up those clues and almost run experiments. Could I try that? Could I do this? Now, a lot of those experiments are going to fail, and we see this in really innovative businesses as well. I work with lots of CEOs and global brands, and that almost the failure rate is a defining characteristic of their success, because they can't do what they used to do 3 years ago and just expect it to be good enough. The customer's changing, the tariffs or the exchange rate or the supply chain is changing. It's all about adapting in this very dynamic environment, where you're trying to stay ahead in every little way, but it's much more dynamic than it is static. It's not one great product and then you dominate for 10 years. It's not one great athlete and they dominate for 10 years. If you see somebody that's at the top of their game in sport over a decade, they're probably 10 different athletes, because we know that on the stadiums that we play in, there are mini cameras. There are probably 10 cameras beaming that footage to every opponent's analysts. So they're dissecting your action in slow motion while you're playing live. It's the last thing on your mind, but it's the first thing on theirs. And they're educating their players and giving them strategies to expose your weaknesses and limit your strengths. So by definition, if somebody's squashing your strengths and not letting you play how you want to, and exposing and pressing your red flags all the time, you have to adapt into a new area, a new space. So that's why that continual adaptation and learning is really, really critical.
But from a pragmatic point of view, and how people could potentially place this into, okay, I understand that these high performers are continuously learning and growing and developing, and they're curious. And if people listen to this show enough, they'll hear me bang on about curiosity. But what does it look like? How does it manifest itself in a genuine scenario? Maybe let's take Sachin Tendulkar, good example. If he is someone who is adapting his game, that 60% that he's adapting, is he asking someone specifically questions? What types of questions is he asking? What does it practically look like?
Well, I think a lot of people go into a cricket match, for example, saying, I want to score 100 today. And when they get out for 12, their heart's broken. And that's basically another day where I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. And it's because their goal's wrong. They're set up to be wrong. Now, the only time we're really defined is when they stick us in a wooden box at the end of life. But if you think you're getting defined every Saturday afternoon, and it's, I don't know, a new ball, you're playing in a men's league and you're a teenager, and the wicket's been rained on, you're not going to have many good days. So you've got the wrong setup. So being able to dial down the outcome focus and dial up the learning and growth focus is really critical. So even with international teams, one little thing I did was give them all a post-it note. We're coming to training today. What are the 3 things you want to focus on? And stick that on the window of the team bus, because when you get back in 2 hours' time, I want you to look at those 3 things and say, did you achieve them or not? Now, just having that plan in your head to say, I want to improve my catching on my left hand, today, or I want to practice my bowling round the wicket today and improve that, improve my accuracy. And then it's that journaling and reflection and reviewing to say, what did I learn today? And again, we know this from parents picking up, little, the little lad, did you win today? Did you score? That's the first question. If you scored, it can go to, get some fast food. If you didn't, that should be a punishment, but it isn't. It's a reward. And if you didn't, right, let's go home. Everyone's a bit sullen. You didn't win and you didn't score. Actually, the last thing you want them to do, they might be, defensive role. You don't want them trying to go and score goals all the time. So it's about how can we learn every day? So parents can say, did you have fun today? Yes, it was this, this, and this. What was the best thing that happened? This happened. Okay, how did you get on? What did you learn? What did the coaches say to you? How are you going to practice that? Because it's much more about being better this week than you were last week, rather than having scored 100. That's really the key. So all of our goals and all of our thinking and all of our preparation for our training and our matches should be on what am I trying to learn and then reflecting on, did I learn it? How can I improve it? And how can I build on that in the next training session? And I think that I probably only learnt that in the back, 5 years of my career. Whereas when I started, I was the first at training, the last to leave, running around till I was absolutely exhausted, thinking that repetition and like a machine gun of bowling was going to make me better. And it wasn't. Thinking between each ball was going to help me. And how did that feel? How can I do that better? And I suppose another analogy is, are we training like somebody on a golf driving range? That's not playing golf. That's just hitting balls repeatedly one after the other. So we almost need to slow that down and reflect and say, okay, my shoulder didn't come through that time. Let me be more relaxed with my shoulder or whatever. And every shot on the driving range, we should be trying to get better, not just a minute older. And that's really what these elite performers have got.
Yeah, you struck on your upbringing, or your latter part of your career sounds very similar to mine in the sense of you had a much longer career than me, but my last year or two was when I suddenly it was probably one of the most resentful, not like the regrettable parts of my injury was the fact that just as I retired at 26, I was like, oh, I'm just getting it now. Like this, I'm just understanding it, and now I can't do it. But it was this thing where I was the same early on in my career, ran myself into a brick wall, and then the nuanced questions that I would ask around my skill were little questions like conversations to the wicketkeeper or the person fielding near me, and just saying, "What do you see? What do you think is the line or the length or whatever it is I need to bowl, the area I need to bowl in?" And it was not because I didn't really know what I was doing. It was down to the fact that I just needed confirmation as well. I need the confirmation that someone else is thinking like me, and then I've got almost permission to do it. And that for me then was, yeah, I am thinking the right way and adaptable. And it didn't take long for like one or two few months to do it. And then you go, I'm a bit more autonomous in this now. I know I don't not need them, but I want them there. But I feel like I can do this myself. And then you're not playing on skill. Well, it's a mental skill. It's my adaptability, my ability to harness whatever attributes I have and change them on the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got to be able to read the context that's in front of us. So I think we all become so intense about what we feel like and what we look like and what other people are thinking of us. It's all internal chatter, really. What we need to be thinking about is what's going on outside. What's the opponent trying to do? How can I get an angle here? What are other people seeing? And we should go home at the end of each day by saying, did I do the best I could have done with what I had on that day? There's no point thinking, well, I'm not as good as the guy that set up Netflix, or I'm not as good as Ben Stokes, because that's not relevant for what I had on that day. But we can easily feel insecure. But as you say, get into the battle, try and understand what's going on, where it's testing you. And if you can answer those questions to the best of your ability, to me, that's what success is all about.
I think too many young people are scared of doing that at the moment. I think they're scared of doing that because, and Simon Sinek had this beautiful quote that young people present a confidence that they don't have. And it's out of this need to feel like if I'm a young cricketer and I'm not at Ben Stokes' level, or if I'm a young basketball player and I'm not a LeBron James, then I I need to present some version of myself like I know what they're doing. But that in itself, purely by doing that, blocks them from being this curious self, being able to ask questions.
Yeah, and very frankly, if you have that mindset where you're always comparing yourself to somebody else, then you don't know whether you're getting there anyway. So you want to have this accelerated learning path where you're constantly thinking, how did that go? How can I improve? How can I get better? And also putting in the work, like we spoke about the drive and the focus and the determination. It's no point just sitting reflecting, looking at the sunset. You've actually got to do something about it. But that link of curiosity first to say, what can I learn here? Then having a crack at it, and then reflecting on how can I improve and what did I take from it. We want old heads on young bodies. That's exactly your point. Not just getting to the end of the conveyor belt and falling off it. We really need more wisdom on younger bodies. And that's the same in business, guess, but it only comes from reflection, being self-critical, being analytical, getting feedback. And another very simple thing is for somebody to ask feedback, say, I'm going to bowl 6 balls here, or I'm going to, on my match today, I want you to give me some feedback on my positioning, on my communication, and, my goal threat, or whatever it might be, or give me some feedback on my positioning and tackle technique today. Give somebody a specific thing you're looking to improve, and then they might say, you were too high in your tackles, I think you can get lower. Great. Guess what next week's practice looks like? Getting as low as you can in practice. Imagine doing that week after week after week after week after week for 8 years. That's what an elite performer does on 15 different parts of the game every week. And it's no surprise they get better.
What do they do when they're faced with mistakes or failure?
They're not surprised because it's hard. I don't know. I mean, imagine it's like going through academic processes, isn't it? You start with your 11 plus or whatever, you go through your SATs, and then you go through your GCSEs, and then you go through your A levels, and then you do degree, then you do master's degree, then you do PhD. You're always going to get wrong answers on all those tests right the way through. So the path to mastery gets steeper. The chance of making mistakes is ever present. So again, another, standard thing is people don't see that as a defining, I'm not a failure, I just failed. But how do I learn? If you see it as a failure, I've made a mistake, I'm never going to come back from it. Unless it's illegal or scandalous or whatever, you shouldn't be worried. Every other thing, if it's well-intentioned and you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to learn, and it's within the rules of the game, crack on. The more failures, the better, as long as you're learning from them. If you keep making the same mistake, you're perhaps not in the right sport. But, definitely failure is part of it. And we should be encouraging that. We fail when we're at the edge of our sort of comfort zone, and we start experimenting. So giving people that courage to take risks and explore their talent and find new things, that's absolutely what we should be doing every day. The thing that we don't realize is the mistakes we're making now are way higher on the mountain than the mistakes we were making 2 years ago. And that's a key thing, to look back down the path and say, look how far I've come. I'm still making mistakes, and that's a good thing. I'm still exploring. But mistakes are going to be critical.
That's a really good point and a nice analogy. Making mistakes higher up the mountain. Are you making better mistakes now?
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's harder terrain. If I play cricket at county level, I'm going to make some mistakes. If I play cricket at international level, I played a game with 120,000 people in the stadium in India. I mean, that you can't prepare for that. So if you're expecting yourself to be perfect as the mountain gets steeper, you're broken before you even start. So being kind to yourself, being your own coach, encouraging yourself and saying, okay, yeah, that didn't go to plan. It's not about positive thinking. It's about forward thinking. What am I going to do next with it?
Mm. Number 3, high performers have a trait of personal leadership.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of flip charts with lots of ideas in there and lots of strategies, but who's executing? And I think what we see with the elite performers in any world is they make promises to themselves and then they keep them. And, this is a sacrifice I've decided because it's aligned to my, carry that, top of my mountain, the top of my Mount Everest. This is part of that path and I need to do it. It's a difficult conversation with my partner, with my boss, with my coach, with my teammate. It's an embarrassing question to an opponent player about how they got so good. It's a difficult question to a client about how we can sell more products to them. All of these things take a risk, and they are nice to write on paper that we're going to do these things because they sound like the right thing to do. But that gap between idea and execution is often very big. And the most successful people just do the brilliant basics every day, as much as they can. And even when it's tough, even when, imagine the peer pressure, you're out in a bar, you don't want to drink, and everyone's saying, what are you drinking? And you're sort of hesitating and you go, right, I'll have a soft drink. That moment is a moment that you build on. And the more you make those difficult choices in those extreme environments, socially, financially, ethically, we can give you more money here if you just cut this corner and do this illegal thing. You can get 10% better here if you just take these drugs that will enhance your performance. These are all choices that we have to make, and they sound like they're going to accelerate our probability of success, but they're not the right thing to do. And we have to play the long game and be disciplined. But it's all about making these promises and then committing to them, because that's what builds our confidence that I am the kind of person that deserves to do well because I've done A, B, and C. So absolutely doing the right thing on a difficult day, making the right choice in a challenging environment when it's easy to take the shortcut. That's really a key point.
I think you struck on something that I've been considering over and over again in my own journey, and I've said it on the show before, that I'm kind of happy that one of the traits that I had when I was younger was I was fairly immune to peer pressure. That I just think that was I don't know why. Maybe it was because some form of consideration that I felt I was different than other people. My condition maybe lent to that, and I just felt like I was a bit of an outsider, and therefore peer pressure wasn't something that I considered, because I just was like, I'm already different, so I don't need to feel like I'm worried about being that. But it's the personal leadership and those choices, doing the extra laps in training, the effort in the gym. I almost see that stuff as kind of really easy because it's effortful. Your body feels good at the end of it. You get good dopamine hits when you just do it anyway. And yeah, some people don't do it and they cut corners, whatever. But it's those little moments, the interpersonal connection moments, that could make or break the perception you think people are going to have of you, or maybe even the relationship you're going to have with you. Like you spoke there about being at the bar and ordering a soft drink, and I can just put myself in that scenario and just remember what it's like going out for a celebration with your friends and everyone's drinking, everyone's got a Guinness in hand, and then you go, I'll have a Coke Zero, and it's like they all turn to you and go, oh, you're not drinking, what are you doing? Like, you suck, like, you're so boring, and you just have to take this barrage of shit like straight away and just get soaked in it, and then go, okay, that's what I'm doing. Like this, I've made this choice, and that I almost see that as the harder part of the self leadership when it comes to trying to get where you want to be in a high performing environment. Because yeah, when you're on the field and you're doing extra laps, like yeah, there's extra benefits you get from that and sort of physical kickbacks, but there's when you're in that social scenario, it's such an awkward feeling, and there's just the sense of isolation and what am I doing? And it's so easy to say yes. So easy.
Yeah, and ultimately all of those micro choices aggregate together. And when you're standing on the start line, just like when we were at school and we opened that exam paper, we either felt, the teacher says, you can turn the paper over now, the clock starts. You know whether you're ready or not. You know whether you deserve to do well or not. And that preparation is your confidence. And you feel prepared because you sacrificed, because you did all of those things. So that's what's really critical. So yeah, I think it's so important that we make those choices and build those choices up over time.
I'm going to go on to number 4, which is more around leading teams. So we're going to shift between individuals and a little bit more towards like team-based environments. What have you learned from those that lead teams in high performance arenas? What are you seeing there?
Well, I've been really lucky, working with interviewing some elite coaches, so people like Sir Alex Ferguson, Pep Guardiola, Eddie Jones, so some really elite leaders in football, rugby, cricket. Um, I think they all have this consistency and drive. So all of those attributes that we've already spoken about of the high performers, the drive, the sort of ambition to be the very best, that humility and curiosity to learn and grow, that accountability that they place, on the choices that they make. And I guess when you step into that leadership environment, it's then starting to talk about the vision So where do we want to take this team? And I think the great leaders have got this ability to tell stories that you feel like you're part of. So generally, when a leader comes into an environment, they want to transform the organization. So they want to, increase the share price in the business or up the sales or, get the team promoted or win the league or whatever it might be. So that's a vision for the future. And I think the best leaders do it in a way that's really alluring and enticing because you want to be part of that story yourself. So if it's just, we want to double the turnover of the business so the shareholders get a return, it's like, okay, great. I can imagine there's a bit more money for me if we do well, but it's pretty dry. It's pretty transactional. Sell more of this, you get more of that. And I think for me, we spend so much time in our workplaces, whether it's sport or business, that you want to feel like if the business transforms and we end up transforming the market or our reputation, well, my reputation is going to change as a result of that. I know, I moved to Gloucestershire and we had an incredible time in one day cricket. We dominated for, 3 or 4 years and won 6 trophies. Incredible. Um, and that era transformed Gloucestershire. We became, from massive underdogs. We won a treble one year and a double the next year. It was amazing. And that transformed my life because that gave me a chance to play for England. I would never have played for England unless I was part of that successful team. So that was a personal transformation that came from John Bracewell and Mark Alane's vision for the club and where they wanted to take it. So, of course, you need to recruit good people and all the rest of it. But I think that compelling vision is a key part of it. And then I think there's a balance of support and challenge that great leaders have. They understand each individual at a very personal level. I think the days of the sort of autocratic leader, the command and control style where you just bark instructions and everyone compliantly follows, those days are gone now. There's much more power and opinion and, sort of freedom of speech down through our teams and through society now. So empowering people and understanding them and giving them freedom to express themselves is really critical. So the whole mental health space, understanding individual difference, being really inclusive, creating psychological safety, that coaching style of leadership is really critical for the support. So you feel like this leader has got my best interest at heart and they will look out for me while I'm striving, while I'm failing and doing my best for them. They will look after me long term. And then they've also got, so you've got the vision, you've got the support, and then you've got the challenge, which is all about, okay, I expect more than you've ever given. These are the performance standards in our team. I'm going to hold you accountable to this consistently every day, every week, every year. And it's that expectation and that data and that transparency and those conversations. There's no wriggle room or ambiguity. This is what we expect. You've got to do your best. I will support you and give you all the rewards you need and everything you need, but you've got to deliver. So I think that's the combination that, we see in great leaders, that they are, again, they've got those previous attributes. So they're growth mindset, open, curious about AI or technology or what other teams are doing. They're always looking for the next frontier, but then they've got this ability to tell a great story and inspire people to, move camp up the mountain. It's going to be hard to move from A to B is going to, call a lot of personal sacrifice, but I will support you through it. And I'll also challenge you to it because the truth is that we're human. We will fall back into our comfort zones if we don't have somebody challenging us. So I know lots of environments are looking at this psychological safety and individual support, but we equally need robust challenge, data, really honest conversations to get the best out of wherever we are.
Yeah, the way you frame that in terms of if the team does well, then my image changes. I think that's really interesting from a sport point of view because I think it's really easy to see that. I think you can win a trophy, be champions of Europe or Premier League or County Championship, World Cup, whatever it is. And then you become a World Cup winner, you become someone who has done that journey. In a corporate sense, I see that being disconnected. I see that sort of, if the business does well, how does that help me? How do I How do I end up being that? And then you put it back to the leaders. Is there a missed message somewhere where they've not translated that over? Because it'd be very easy, just you see some sort of money-making machine and just think, "Oh, well, if I turn out more effort and it brings in more income, it's only benefiting this person higher up the food chain than I am."
It's a great point, and it's a great challenge, and it's often true. And I think this is what separates the great businesses. So, would you recruit the head of a local taxi company or somebody two down at Uber? And somebody who's in one of these brands that's been a breakthrough brand, um, you would expect that they've picked up certain skills and connections and networks and whatever it might be that's going to be transformational for your business. So I think I'm working with a couple of really large brands. They're running transformations, and the conversation is largely around operating model and strategy and the mechanics of the business. But for every individual, if you're about to go through a corporate transformation, that's a really fascinating. You've got a front seat view of something incredible unfolding in front of you. So everyone will be scared about that. Everybody will be worried about that. What does this mean for me? But if you embrace it and do the very best you can with this open, positive mindset to try and make the best of whatever comes, yes, you're going to be put out of your comfort zone. Yes, you're going to have to meet new people or work in different areas. But if you fast forward 3 or 4 years, like an era in a cricket team, then this could be the best experience of your life. And now when that's on your CV, you're a completely different person because you've just led an internal comms campaign, or you've just led a new software being integrated into your business. So you've now been pushed to develop skills that's transformed your expertise, your network, your outlook on life, your confidence about the ability to deliver change. That has to be transformational for the individual as well, whether you get financial benefit from it or not. But again, we need to be looking at learning as a key driver of success, not just the salary and the bonus.
The leaders of these high-performing teams, do they forego being liked in to try and strive for this?
I think being respected is probably a better target. Being liked means you'll probably be buying everyone drinks every night and agreeing with them and laughing at all their jokes. Being respected means you put the business first and you made some difficult calls, which clearly would be difficult for you as well, and might have actually, put your personal goals away as well. You might have had to work in a different city or in a different department, but you did it because that's what the business needed at that time. And yes, you did have to make some people redundant, which mustn't have been very nice, but that's what the business asked you to do and you did it. So I don't think it's been liked, but I think respected is a better way of looking at it. And ultimately, the people that lead, they go first. They show vulnerability first. They give trust first. They, give flexibility. They try and understand first. And all of these things then create the environment where people want to follow. And we don't often, working with Langley Sharp, one of the senior leaders in the military, and he talks a lot about followership. I know that's a big model at Sandhurst at the moment. And leadership, everyone has leadership development, but not many people have followership development. And you can't have a high performing organization without great leadership, but also without people who are willing to get the work done and follow. And even though they might not agree, they might have had their say on how a business responds to a particular challenge. But once the decision is made by a senior leader, you've still got to follow, and bowl into the wind or whatever it might be. You've got to do your bit because, again, without that execution and that discipline on a daily basis, stuff doesn't get done.
Is that harder to find followership right now because people are maybe forging their own opinions? Everyone's got access to social media and maybe virtue signaling in some form of way. Yeah, do you think that is it's a great point? Followership. I've never heard of that term and never considered it in actually how it looks. But you do, as in a sports team, you kind of conform to what is said. Like you just have to do it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't. The same military, like you live and die by your decision. But do you see that followership becoming harder now?
I think you need to be intentional about it for sure. This is a period where you have some say on the strategy, whether it's at a team level or a sort of a divisional level or an international level in a business. Wherever you sit, there's a time when you're asked your opinion, and then there's a time when somebody senior in the organization has to make a call. Now, so many of these decisions are so nuanced. Is this something that's good locally but going to compromise us internationally? Or is this going to be really good in the short term, but that's going to compromise us in the long term? Or this is really good. This is really bad for the current client projects, but this is really good for the long term client projects. These tensions are what a leader has to deal with all the time. you know, is this really good from a data perspective, but really hard for the people? Or are we going to go really close to the people and listen to what they say? Or are we going to listen to the customer data? We're constantly shuttling across these, lines to work out where the decisions are made. And it's all about trade offs. Every high performance decision really is a trade off. Not having the drink at the bar is potentially a social cost for an athletic gain. These are trade offs that we have to make all the time. And it's how many of those you get right more often, which defines whether you're successful or not. So, so for a followership group, you will have to have a bit of say so you feel like you're part of the organization and you're empowered to come up with something. But when the decision's made, you've got to get on and execute 100%. So, disagree and commit kind of model. And then hopefully at some point, again, there will be a review period. Right, we said we were going to play like this for the last 3 games. We've got to admit that didn't really work. Look at the stats, look at the data, look at this. Okay, we need to change. And what you said might be right, but nevertheless, that was what was decided at the time, and you need to follow that. So I think there is a tension between followership and leadership, but ultimately without both, you won't get high performance.
Finally, last one. When it comes to high performance teams and culture, what makes the best stand out?
Whew, that could be a month's worth of podcasts all in a row, but I think you've got to have very high performing individuals to have a high performing team. I think that's the key thing. But once you've recruited great people in, I think there's something that's often missing in an environment, both in sport and in business. And that's an emotional competitive edge that great teams have got. So we know that the All Blacks have got some incredible, content and induction and songs and rituals and things. And this is really what sets a team apart. Do you feel that sense of belonging because the team has articulated who they are and why they're different? Your first day at Man City should be different to your first day at Man United. Your first day at Barclays should be different to your first day at HSBC, because they should be telling you different stories about the heritage of that organization. And it's when you can see your values and your heritage and your future aspirations in their story and in their narrative, that's when things start to connect, because then you feel like I'm striving for what the organization wants to become as well. So it's not just me pulling away, or it's not just them carrying me like a passenger. I'm absolutely, intertwined in terms of my ambition and the club's ambition. So I think part of that is storytelling and the bosses really articulating that. And as we said earlier, sort of caring about the individuals and making them feel part of it. But I do think there's a creative piece which I really enjoy working on with both sport and business. And that is, you kiss the badge, but what does it mean? What does the badge mean? And we created some great, work around that with the Proteas, the cricket team. Previously they were called the Springbok cricket team, and that was a sort of bygone era, really. That when Nelson Mandela was released, they got renamed as the Proteas, but now they've got a badge, and you've got Morne Morkel, a 6'8" fast bowler, kissing a flower ultimately. And what does that mean? You've got a 10-foot flower on the side of the bus saying pure Proteas. And I said, well, if you don't know what Proteas means, what are you kissing and why are you getting on the bus? So we did a little bit of research around the identity of the Protea and found that the Protea flower is indigenous to that Cape, like Table Mountain sort of area. It starts its life cycle with a bushfire. So the heat of the bushfire melts the resin seed pod on the protea. It's so resilient to withstand that fire. And then the seed is the first to drop and colonize that black scorched earth. So you've got fire, you've got resilience, you've got fast to adapt. All of these characteristics are brilliant for the cricket team. So we brought those into the environment, and then we needed some rituals to bring that to life. So the induction for the Proteas cricket team became standing round a campfire the night before the test match, where the players would pass round, live Protea plants and talk about the stories of the new player coming into the environment and how they needed to be fast to adapt and they needed to be resilient. And it was over the fire that the players got past their cap, the Protea's cap, because the Protea plant, which is their emblem, starts its life cycle with a bushfire. So the fire symbolizes the start of a new induction of a person into that environment. So that emotional touch point now has stayed with those players for, decades, and they'll never forget those moments, and telling their stories and talking about their families and, their backgrounds and their aspirations and their hopes as they come into that environment, standing around a fire with all the village elders like A.B. de Villiers and Dale Steyn. I mean, what an amazing touch point. I think when I played for England, we were at the Hilton Hotel before a tour, and I got a Vodafone bag and got told to go and see Bob if it didn't fit me properly, But I think this bringing people into the environment and making these moments feel special. How do we celebrate? A.B. de Villiers wrote a new team song which had 5 different African languages in it, whereas previously it was just the Boka Boka. It was too narrow for the identity of that South African team and its modern guys. So I think we've got to be very careful about where our team creates these emotional touch points, and we've got to dial that up just as much as we dial up the trophies and the finances in business. We are human beings, and we need to feel part of a community that we're really proud to strive for something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's where purpose and identity are really critical emotional levers that we can pull in our teams.
I think the amount of courage it takes to do that as well is so underestimated, because far too many people will do that going, "That's a great idea. Love how it sounds, Jeremy. Like, let's do it. Oh, hold on. You want us to do a campfire? You want us to, that's a bit weird. Like, you want us to pass some flowers around? Come on. You're joking, right?" And that would be really easy to wrap yourself in this sort of macho exterior and just be like, "No, I'm not doing that. I've got to preserve this image of myself that I'm so desperately trying to hold on to." And have you seen Chasing the Sun series, Chasing the Sun? So I talk about, I picked out a moment within that second series when Rassi Erasmus has decided that they're playing France coming up, and he decided that the national anthem was going to be, for France, was going to be so loud that he didn't want his players to get thrown off it. So he goes to training and has a boombox, and he's chasing the players around with this boombox, constantly on loop, the French national anthem. Fast forward to when the semi-final or quarter-final, whichever one it was, national anthem plays, and all the South African Springboks are standing there steadfast, unmoved by this occasion and locked in, so it didn't bother them. And I thought, how many coaches would get to that moment where he knew this thing meant something, it had a point, but how many coaches would get to that moment where the first player to say, "Coach, what are you doing? Put that away. That's ridiculous," and just call him out on the ridiculousness of the situation. Many coaches would just put it away and go, "Yeah, you're right. Like, I'll do it." But he held on to it, and he was courageous, and no, I don't care what it costs me, or what it costs. This is for the betterment of everything else. And that takes courage and bravery. And it's similar to, I think, of James Kerr when he wrote Legacy. And it's about the All Blacks. A lot of that stuff within Legacy was courageous and brave and willing to go against what would kind of be conventional, would kind of be normal, and because this is something better for everyone else. And if you don't fit, you don't like it, you're not going to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it talks to this kind of culture where, I could imagine Rassi would say, what are the things that might derail us coming into this game? Now, there might be, a prop doing this or a fullback doing that, or a, line out that comes in a bit sneaky. Those are all things, but also the national anthem is a potential derailer point. So they should talk about these things and say, what if this happens? What if that happens? And because they've got an open, creative environment where anyone can talk about any things that they think about, then the coach is creating a novel solution to that, so that then the players in their minds while they're listening to the French national anthem are thinking, oh, I remember Rassi running around with a beatbox doing this. How funny was that? Not, we've got the world against us here and these are going to be difficult to beat. So it's not just a leader in isolation trying to come up with something clever on a scrapbook and then launch it at a critical time. That would feel crazy. This is a high performance partnership where the coach is like the detective looking for all the, worrying signs or all the strengths and weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and coming up with ideas and socializing them with a senior player group about, this is what I'm thinking of doing for training. How can I make it so it's adopted well by the players? We didn't with the Proteas just say, go and stand by the fire and here's a Protea, start telling some emotional stories. This is a whole process of getting buy-in. And ultimately, everyone wants to feel part of an incredible special team where you've got, a band of brothers or a sisterhood or whatever, that you feel like you've got this incredible set of relationships and you're fighting for something bigger than yourself in a team that's completely unique. Now, those relationships won't strengthen unless you've got vulnerability. You can't be completely unique unless you do something that's different to everybody else. And you can't fight for a purpose that's bigger than yourself unless you talk about the impact you have on patients or customers or fans or the legacy you want to leave. So, all of those things are wrapped up in the same model of performance, and they're not just let's go and smash it and smash ourselves and make sure you win or we're failures. Hopefully, over the last hour, we've talked about lots of different strands, if you like, that have woven together to create this high performance ball. And that's really what it's all about. There are thousands of different components that link together. And I guess our job when we're supporting leaders in business or sport is to listen to what they're saying, to try and understand where they're at and the barriers that they've got, and pull on the threads at the right time to try and strengthen this rope to become something really, unbreakable, which is ultimately what we want our teams to be.
How long did it take with the Proteas to get all to that place?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a 12-month process. And equally, that was a creative activity that then the marketing team took on. And that whole Protea Fire hashtag is still, alive today. That went, through schools and governments. What I don't like is where a marketing team says, we are this kind of club, we are this kind of team, and they tell the players who they are because it sounds good on Instagram. It's got to come from authentic storytelling about our heritage, about our heroes, about our unique geography or, our unique club that we've got. And when it's authentic and when it comes from a really honest place, and when the team start to shape it, like AB writing the team song, that's been well researched. AB knows all the African languages. He loves music. He's written a song. He's one of the senior players. He's one of the best players ever. He's written a song for the next generation of this team to celebrate with. Who's going to think that's stupid? It's what everybody craves, but we just don't put enough emphasis on it. And as a result of that, we get bland teams, transactional contracts. And if I'm playing for the, Delhi this or the Melbourne that or the San Francisco this, just pass me the shirt and make sure the money gets paid in, and I'll stay here as long as the payments get made. And that's not what we want in business or sport. We want to create environments where people feel emotionally engaged and proud of it, and then incredible things can happen, because that's when you start to sacrifice and have those difficult conversations and challenge each other and uphold the standards, because you're building something incredible. And I've been so lucky to be part of a couple of teams that have done that. And I loved working with other teams to try and create it. But it's not a straightforward process, unfortunately.
I think the England football team needs it. Do you know what I mean? I think the England football team could have a bit of that, and because one thing I loved about the All Blacks in James Kerr's book was the fact that they'd brought Adidas into that conversation, exactly what you said, to the point where they knew that a man on the street could put on an All Blacks jersey and know what's expected of them. And I think if you think I think of the England football team, I wouldn't know. I would know what it means to be a Springbok. I'd know what it means to be a Protea. I know what it means to be an All Black. Those three teams have done it incredibly well. I wouldn't know what it means to be in an England football shirt. So you never know.
I think Gareth's done incredibly well with that, to be fair. I think the amount of pressure, for us, the England football team is a social barometer for the mood of the whole country, isn't it? Like many sports.
Most pressurized team, I think, in the world.
Well, a most pressurized job, even more than the Prime Minister at things. But I think, Gareth's done an incredible job of being a spokesperson for, a diverse group of players that were under pressure to stand up for some very big, social causes. And I think they did that incredibly well. So I think the unity and the standards and the integrity of the England football teams moved, forward massively. And I know Owen Eastwood, who wrote the book Belonging, he was involved with England in starting to generate some of that identity and purpose. So I think it's moved a long way. But as we know, there's huge external pressure and complexity, so much passion, so much opinion, so much media scrutiny on that it's never going to be a straightforward process. But I think they've made good strides.
Yeah, especially with so many multiple brands coming in. Players themselves are brands, so it's just multiple brands. Jeremy, look, thank you so much for your time, mate. For people that maybe aren't familiar with what you do, you have your podcast, you have your content platform where majority of what we've spoken about and even more is going to be available for people to access. And I think even personally from my own thoughts is the fact that I find it inspiring to know that someone from my world of cricket has gone on the journey that you've gone on and been in the rooms that you've been in. So it kind of gives me hope for where potentially even I could go in the future. And it's always inspiring to see that. So tell people where's the best place to follow, get stuck into what you offer, and send them wherever you want to send them.
Definitely. Well, firstly, well done to you. I think you made a great transition out of sport. It's not straightforward to do that. So you've been incredibly entrepreneurial and hardworking, and this area of mental skills and mental health and helping people to perform and enjoy the sport more is a great place to be. So I think you've done a great first innings on that, and I'm sure the second innings will be great. Now you're getting your momentum. In terms of my work, my company Sporting Edge, so that's www.sportingedge.com. That's an easy place to find out more, and you can see all the interviews of the All Blacks captains or Shane Warne and some absolute legends from sport. And then LinkedIn is a good place. So Jeremy Snape on LinkedIn. So sportingedge.com has got the platform, and we work with lots of blue chip businesses around the world, inspiring them to think like the high performers. And we use the interview content either with digital learning programs or with the events and keynotes. So the podcast is called Inside the Mind of Champions, and that's available on Spotify and Apple and all the other good places for it. So it'd be great to keep the inspiration going when your audience, if they want to get into some of our content as well, I'm sure they'd enjoy that.
Yeah, there's some incredible guests. No doubt people will enjoy that. Look, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
Great stuff. Good to see you.
If you enjoyed that episode with Jeremy and you want to enjoy even more episodes of the show, then I've put together a playlist of the best places for you to get started with. All you got to do is go right around here.